Welcome, everyone. This is Valerie Fletcher, the Executive Director of the Institute for Human-Centered Design. I want to acknowledge that this series is dedicated, as we have done for some time, to the memory of an extraordinary young woman, Eliza Forrest Kaye Bromfield. Today, we are sharing the story of a gathering place, exploring Tulsa's spirit of unity. And I'm thrilled that we have three people who have been involved from the beginning. And that's Jeff Stavo, the Chief Operating Officer of the Tulsa Community Foundation and the Kaiser Family Foundation, Matt Urbanski, partner at Michael Van Valkenburg Architects, Michael Van Valkenburg Associates, and Scott Streeb, principal of Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. I want to take a minute just to acknowledge that our relationship with the Michael Van Valkenburg firm goes back over 20 years. And we deal with a lot of design firms all over the country and all over the world. And we had a very special relationship with the Van Valkenburg firm back, this is the late 90s. And they were one of those near immediate conversion experiences when we talked to them about the idea of universal design. And they were an immediate affirmation that, it is not about just tell me what I have to do. It is about what design can do. And we have had such pleasure in watching all of the projects, and they are numerous and all over the world and extraordinary, roll out with that as part of who they are. I'm also thrilled to be able to share a story that is about a response to a tragic reality that much of the United States shares. And that is the alarming story of the Tulsa race massacre 101 years ago in 1921, the destruction of what many people call Black Wall Street, which was in downtown Tulsa. And this is a story that brings this forward to the present and brings people together. The idea behind this enormous project is that change can happen best when people are physically sharing space and experience. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Scott and Jeff to tell us this remarkable story. Thank you, gentlemen. Please take it away.
Thank you, Valerie. We're all thrilled to be here and have this platform to share Gathering Place. The format of this presentation will be a moderated discussion between Matt, Jeff, and I. I'll run the slides and kind of cue them up. But our hope is that it's rather conversational, and that will be a stimulating way to share the process and the thinking behind the project. So Matt, why don't you start by talking about when this job started, the type of work we were doing, and what led to us working on the Gathering Place.
Sure, that's great. Okay, so yeah, these are two of our projects that were, Brooklyn Bridge Park was partially built, and Maggie Daly Park was actually getting built or finishing design and getting built when we first met Jeff and his team, where they put out an international competition for their site. We'll get to that, but we were really, our firm was focusing on a lot of very landscape-centered projects where the landscape is the most important thing, the thing that brings people together, and that turns out to be mostly parks and campus work. That's mostly what we focus on, although we do other things as well, gardens and commercial work and things like that. But the idea that a city can, create a space that brings people together in a way that hasn't been tried yet, bringing new kinds of programs and things like that into parks that kind of push them beyond kind of trees and lawns and spaces that are more passive, but really kind of bring active engagement into the spaces. And many times with a nonprofit partner working with government in both of these cases, both in Chicago and New York, that was the case. And so these were great models that for Jeff and the foundation to see and come and visit and be inspired by, and that helped a lot to have those in place.
And we were really drawn by this quote at the beginning where George Kaiser Family Foundation is dedicated to making Tulsa the best city for children to be born, grow, and succeed. So maybe Jeff, you could just say a little bit about that. and kind of what your initial hopes were for this project.
Sure. The foundation's large focus is equal opportunity for all children. And George really has a heartfelt passion for children and breaking the cycle, intergenerational cycle of poverty. And a lot of people ask us, how does the park fit into that strategy? And, Tulsa, and it was, as Valerie talked about, the 1921 race massacre, like many cities across the country have seen tremendous trauma. The park is a unifier, something to kind of break down the silos and provide something for everyone, to do at the park. And, Matt touched on active programming, and that was really when we were looking at different landscape architect and master planning firms. We really were looking for something that everyone in Tulsa could participate or see themselves there together. And we wanted the park to be a unifier. So breaking down kind of all the silos, the economic silos, the geographic silos, more recently political silos, and providing access for everyone. And that's what MVVA really brought to the table for us, was that they didn't, exceptional landscape. There's no question that it's world-class in almost every feature, but really bringing the programming out so that everyone has something to do at the park. That was really the differentiating factor for us.
Thanks, Jeff. So the project site is located south of downtown Tulsa along Riverside Drive, adjacent to the Arkansas River, and surrounded mostly by residential housing. And we originally visited the site in 2010. It was actually a snowy afternoon, which is rare for Tulsa. But what we saw was a massive flat site, open fields, but we also saw a lot of opportunity. And the way the request for proposals was written was extremely open-ended. It didn't say we want a park. It didn't say we want a museum. It just said we want a gathering place, which was a bit of a head scratcher for us. Matt, do you want to say anything about that?
It was interestingly very open and actually a little confusing, because they also sent us a bunch of studies that other firms had done that they weren't going to pursue, but you never understand how important that is. It was kind of the greatest thing about the project in terms of understanding it is the name. The gathering place was the name they came up with, and that really helped us guide us in terms of understanding what the whole mission was. But let's go forward here, Scott, with more explanatory images.
Yeah, and we have a lot of quotes throughout the presentation because there's just so many pieces to the puzzle that are so well explained. But George, being cognizant of the fact that he had the advantage of both genetics and upbringing, and when he looks around at those who did not have these advantages, it became clear to him that he had a moral obligation to direct his resources to help repair that inequity. And I think Jeff just touched on that a little bit, but it's just such an inspiring quote that really filled up the tank for us and really made this special. Jeff, did you purposely make the proposal open-ended to kind of see what creatives came up with, or what was the thinking behind that?
We are not park designers, and Matt touched on the early findings that we had, and we had several consultants that we'd engaged with, coming with some great ideas. But what we've kind of found ourselves doing is pushing our own ideas around, and we were kind of stuck in the muck, if you will. And so we stepped back and wrote the RFQ, the qualifications, and the request for proposals in a real open format, so that really the true creativity of each of those firms could be kind of manifested in the responses, because we wanted the best and brightest to work on the project, and we wanted their best and brightest ideas. We didn't want any constraint at all. And so that's how we set that process up. We had almost 100 firms that responded to the qualifications process. And through the process, we narrowed it to 33 firms that actually what we considered qualified and could submit a proposal. And then out of that, we chose 4 firms that we actually provided a stipend to and allowed them to kind of bring us their best ideas for the site.
Great. So essentially what this presentation is going to be about is how we transformed this flat open field into what you see today with over 60 feet of grade change and all the program you could ever imagine. And then just a side-by-side showing what the transformation was from existing conditions to the built project. So as Jeff mentioned, there were four paid firms with a stipend to develop some concept ideas. And I think what became immediately obvious to us was this assembly of the sites. Matt, can you say a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this what distinguished us in our entry, but we, there was the river there, but you were separated by the road, the Riverside Drive. There's a big flat site that we just showed you an image of. There's some other smaller pieces that were owned by the city. There's waterfront property. There was a site that had some old apartments that were going to be taken down. So it was an incredible gift in terms of area, but it was very disjointed and disconnected. And obviously connecting to the river was an important thing for us. And also connecting all the pieces together. And it was difficult because of this narrow neck that you could see in the middle there. And what you'll see next here is we came up with this idea of bridging over the road and connecting to the river by using a land bridge. And this was our competition drawing that we did, where we, were inspired by these land bridges that work in Central Park that connect the park across the intervening roads that go through Central Park. And we also had this idea of making a pond to create a center and having a lodge that would bring people there. All the key elements of the park that are still there were in this. They got rearranged. In fact, the foundation loved the land bridge so much that they wanted to. So it was 2 big changes. We rotated the pond and we added another land bridge ultimately in the design.
I think go ahead, Jeff.
The actual, what's fascinating to me is this competition scheme was presented in May of 2011, but really it looks almost identical to this. It's amazing. Why we did do a lot of detailed design and adjustments. The base creative really was woven through the entire process. It really didn't take on huge changes.
Well, it's just thousands of iterations, really. And that's how our work gets better, is we have an idea and then we don't just build the idea. What we do is we go back and forth in amongst ourselves and also with the client. And then ultimately you'll see here with our outreach plan with the community. So there's actually a collective intelligence that gets embedded in the project. That's, thousands of IQ, I guess I would call it, but it's way more than an idea. There's strong ideas that win the competition and kind of hold it together, like Jeff said, but it's also literally dozens and dozens of iterations and models and redrawing and representing. And we'll show you a little bit of that. Not all of them, don't worry. Next, please.
Yeah, the ingredients were there at the beginning with large scale gathering lawns that could be programmed throughout the year with concerts and movies, some idea of a 4-season use interior space that you can look at to the distant landscape, really fun stuff for teens, which is sometimes the hardest age group to program for, interaction with the water's edge and a complexity to the water's edge and access to the water's edge. Tulsa gets so hot, so having a very strong overlay of water play for everyone. And then finally, just very passive areas as well. to complement the exuberance of some of our ideas.
And connecting to the river. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we understood our competition winning ideas to be these 4 bullets. I'll be interested to see if Jeff agrees, but something for everyone, taking those fragmented sites and combining them together through the use of topography and landform, making something spatially diverse. So you can go to one area one day and come back the next weekend and go to a different area and have a variety of experiences. And then finally, this water is a unifying element. Jeff, I don't know if there was anything else beyond that you saw in that competition scheme, or does that sum it up?
I mean, the natural landscape was something that was super important. We didn't want it to look, curated or manicured. We wanted it to be, a little bit of rawness to it, kind of embracing the tall grass prairie looks and effects. And that was something that MVVA had brought in other projects that they had done. Of course, the active programming and passive programming. And one real important element is the listening and the community engagement that's part of their process. Not all landscape firms bring that to the table and really embrace it. And that's something that was really important for Tulsans. MVVA gave us the broad look and feel, but Tulsans really felt part of the design process because of what MVVA did and the number of community meetings that we held. So that was super important for the winning ideas.
Great. So moving on to that public engagement phase, at this point, we were hired to do the project. And the first thing we wanted to do is get out there and get feedback from the public and garner their support and excitement. So early 2012, we make an existing conditions model and then essentially what our competition proposal was. And you can see here we have a lot of illustrations on the walls, a lot of ways to get people talking. We had probably about 10 MVVA staff members out there having conversations, soliciting feedback, and really trying to get as many people together as possible and start talking. We're also cognizant of the fact that many people are not able to show up at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday to a presentation. So there was a whole litany of outreach online and in the news and in person, and the models were set up so you could show up at your leisure. So really trying to stretch that user group and feedback group as far as we can. And what we're able to do through those online surveys and feedback was begin to distill all that information, what people are interested in, what they're not interested in, what they want to do, what they want to see, and what would make it a comfortable place for them to visit. And essentially, we boiled down these design principles and presented them to the GKFF's board. I think it's important to say that GKFF, the George Kaiser Family Foundation, was so central in organizing this, pushing it forward, thinking up unique outreach ideas. So Jeff, maybe you could say a little bit about the outreach you did, because there was a good amount that MVVA wasn't part of, really, that you kind of did on your own and came back to us with the feedback.
Yeah, we structured, so kind of pre-design, we did a lot of neighborhood community engagement, and we broke it into kind of near site and then kind of the general overall city engagement. And the near site, we did a lot of door-to-door communication with people on doorstep. We did a lot of neighborhood meetings. We broke the neighborhood into smaller groups to listen to their thoughts and ideas and, of course, concerns. Then we had larger city charrettes where we actually, had people bring their ideas, things they'd seen traveling, or things that they'd experienced, or things that they thought of but maybe didn't know could be possible. We really wanted the best ideas from everyone, but a lot of face-to-face community meetings and neighborhood meetings.
Great. In addition to that early work before developing the design too much, we also wanted to get a good understanding of that. What makes the park feel real and of Tulsa? And there's these reference sites that we went to, including Osage County, the Oxley Nature Center, Chandler Park, which is a local park nearby, and the Tallgrass Prairies. And what that did was it really gave us a flavor of what would feel true to this place and not superimposed into Tulsa. Matt, maybe you could talk a little bit about that process and just kind of the textures and vegetation we discovered.
Yeah, I would say the most important, this was something that we came up with during this process, because you're always trying to come up with ways of bridging and communicating with people in terms of, not making it too general a discussion, but make it about landscape and people and what they appreciate and what means something to them. And we came up with this question in this process of, well, what are the local landscapes that mean something to you and why? And it was, when you're going to another city, but I would even ask this now where I live. This is a question I now ask in every public process, even if I was going to do a local park where, right near me, but going to another city was even more important. And then, where to go, because, people know the place, especially people that are interested in coming to a public meetings about a park, and then why they like them and what it means to them is really a way of, bridging the kind of language and connection that you want between landscape and people and coming together. And we saw some extraordinary things, including what are called the rock rooms there on the lower left, which is a natural rock formation in Chandler Park, which became a major inspiration for some of our stonework in the park. And then models just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, this model was fabricated in our New York office. I believe it was about 30 feet long and driven out to Tulsa. And it's just such a great way to get a conversation going. People can put their eye at eye level and ask questions and walk around it and say, hey, that's my house, or hey, that's the road I drive down every day. So it's just such a great conversation starter. And Jeff, I believe you left this model up for people to come visit after this meeting so they could kind of have their own time with it.
Yeah, we left it. This was at the Tulsa Community College's Center for Creativity. The model and all of the illustrations, you can kind of see some of the illustrations on the wall. They stayed there for a couple of weeks after, and then we took it on a road tour. We used bank lobbies, large office building lobbies. We used the mall, and we basically did a road show to kind of get this out and into the community so that people could see it. And then we used the model as a tool for building support amongst the donor community and the corporate community to help as part of our fundraising strategies for raising money for helping build and endow the operations of the park. And it was incredibly helpful. As Matt said, it's easier than pictures to have a dimensional kind of look and feel of what the park is and will be. I mean, people understand it's not detailed, but it gives you enough of an idea of how it's going to look and feel. And it really was a helpful tool for the foundation and for the community and the public as a whole.
Just talk a little bit about the foundation not wanting to be just the sugar daddy on this thing, but why not for the money, but more for the community building, that whole aspect that George wanted to make sure it was the donors were from, all over the place.
Sure. Well, for the same reason that we engage the public in a real, super meaningful way, we wanted the park to be paid for, with as much public infrastructure dollars as possible and with enough diverse kind of look and feel of donors so that it wasn't really just one foundation's pet project, that it was really built with a coalition. And after we completed the fundraising, we raised about $210 million from 80 different donor entities, whether they're individual donors, foundations, or corporate donors and foundations. So a pretty diverse set of donors. And, Tulsa is, a really incredible city, but it doesn't have a huge tax base. And so a lot of these type of civic enhancement type projects, fall to the wayside while taking care of what cities normally have to take care of, the infrastructure itself. So this was a big extra lift. And the corporate community really engaged it because they looked at it as an important attraction and retention tool for employees. And that was something that we never ever really contemplated. Even when we embarked on fundraising, we felt like it would mostly be foundations that would support us. But what we found was the corporate community in Tulsa really needed something to get the best and brightest talent to stay in Tulsa and to come to Tulsa. And they felt that the gathering place was that linchpin for them.
Yeah, they're stealing it all from Denver. Right. So the rest of the presentation, we're just going to go through some of the spaces and a little bit of the design process and the outcome and really how each space supports GKFF's mission. The motto for the park is a place for all, and you really feel that walking amongst the park. So starting with the patio, which is really the front door, it's a low-cost food option space for families, and it also has the least expensive scoop of ice cream in Tulsa, which is just another way of engagement in bringing people to the park. So we always had this vision of a really comfortable place for families, a place where it'd be appropriate to drink beer and have children frolic around. There's a lot of models of this in Germany, and it's really a place where if parents are comfortable, then the kids will stay for a long time, and lots of shade. There were some existing oak trees that were well maintained in this area, so we were able to maintain those as well. And of course, a lot of our work was through that model making exercise, and there were hundreds of models made, really trying to work out the three-dimensional aspects of this space. And what you ultimately have is a just really comfortable and inviting place where you could either bring your own food or have a very low-cost burger. It's appropriate to have a beer if you're into that. There's also sodas and a lot of non-alcoholic options. And then finally, a play piece beyond that children can comfortably entertain themselves, and it's on one side. So parents always have this sense of containment and that their kids won't go scurrying off. Matt, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to say about this space.
No, I mean, it's just, when you have a public outreach process, the idea that people want to eat and have access to food and honestly to wine and beer too in a public park is a super popular idea. Everyone wants bathrooms, play areas, picnic areas, and also they want to be able to get something to eat. And so this is very responsive to the public, but and brings people here, brings people together.
Also notice the tables are beer garden type long tables. So we're promoting the idea that, it's not like going to a family restaurant where there's 4 tops and 6 tops and 2 tops. You're trying to create a space that people, families can be all sitting together, in a long table format. And it promotes the opportunity of kind of maybe bumping into someone or talking to someone, or maybe the kids scurry off and play, as Scott was saying, in this little playground inside it. Every bit of the furniture and the fixtures and kind of the way the layout promotes that kind of that, interaction and the hope of a spark of an interaction.
That's great. And then there are many initiatives that the George Kaiser Family Foundation has been able to hardwire into the park and use the park as a setting for that. One of those is Hunger Free Oklahoma. You can see these pictures on site where they use the parking lot. But Jeff, can you say a little bit about this initiative?
Yeah, so we don't look at the park as just kind of the park. We look at it as a hub for the entire community. So during the very early parts of the pandemic, and I mean, we're talking very early, this became the home base for the city's food distribution and meal and lunch programs from the schools that were shuttered. So, and some of these types of programs, we even have coupons that can be redeemed at the park food kiosks from folks who get those vouchers. So everything we do at the park is kind of woven in to helping Tulsans as a whole and bringing them together.
Next is the lodge. This is actually from an article, but they called it a living room for the entire city. And I just love that so much because it was just the most simple way to describe our goals there. You saw this image earlier in the presentation, but this idea that in the winter, you don't get as many park goers, but if there was a really warm, comfortable space with a large fireplace that anyone would feel welcome into and almost have an experience that a lot of people don't have, which is that kind of higher end lodge experience that you need to have a lot of wealth to go to. Could we provide that sort of space and make everyone feel comfortable inside it? So
it's really like a reinvention of an old idea. Like if you might have been to a Boy Scout camp that has a lodge, or you go to Yellowstone and they have the big lodge there, and it's just so nice to have a somewhat luxurious spot that's really open to everybody, and that you can go and hang out in. And it really doesn't have a specific program. I mean, people go there and they have little knitting circles and they are playing cards together and they're reading the newspaper and they're just meeting each other there. It's very neat that way. And we were very happy that Jeff and George and everybody wanted to make it kind of nice. It doesn't have this kind of bulletproof public space kind of feel that often happens when you try to make things, damage proof, with the, it's got beautiful furniture and stonework and stuff like that. And you really feel like a special person when you go in there, and anybody does that goes in there.
And this was a real risk. This was a real risk for us. We didn't know how the public would engage with it. We didn't know how they would treat it. I think a lot of times, you have kind of this idea of what's going to happen. What this has really shown to us is that Tulsans have great pride in the facility and in the park, and they want to take care of it. So we have very little vandalism or damage that's deliberate. So it's while everything is sturdy and safe, but it has a richness and elegance to it, but people want to take care of that. The public is really engaged with it in a positive way.
absolutely. And I think the floor to ceiling transparent glass shows you who's in there. It shows activity at night or in the winter, and you just feel very invited. There's multiple access points at 2 different levels and circulation that weaves through and around. So there's a whole landscape experience throughout the building. And as you're inside, it's, as Matt and Jeff said, extremely comfortable. You can sit in a nice cushioned chair, look at the distant landscape, and it definitely challenges our assumptions as to what a public space can look and feel like. There's this intuition to make it all stainless steel and like you could power wash the interior. This does the opposite, and the psychology and the way people treat it is proof of concept that you can make spaces like this.
You also can get out of the heat, obviously. It's not just for the winter.
Yeah,
So it really does increase the accessibility of the site for people.
absolutely. On to Mist Mountain. Maybe it's the first time you've heard of a Mist Mountain. We hope so, because we really tried to invent program that brings people together. Oftentimes you'll see a list of park programming areas and you have barbecues and picnic shelters, but by creating these invented programmatic spaces, we're able to really curate who we're trying to bring together and how. So,
Well, as
Matt, maybe
you're
you can-
going
yeah.
through that, Scott, I just want to say something as you're looking at these images. I mean, one of the important things for George and the foundation was they didn't want to do things that they thought the city should be doing or the city could be doing. They wanted to bring stuff that was wouldn't be an opportunity otherwise. And so they didn't make a lot of ordinary recreation or ordinary spaces. Soccer fields, for instance, weren't included because there are soccer fields in the city, and if they need more, they could make more. That you don't need a foundation to make a soccer field, but to make something as poetic or kind of out there as Miss Mountain, I mean, certainly that's not going to be a normal thing that a city is going to have a vote on and start raising spending money on. So the more I don't know what you'd say, less predetermined kind of things are what they wanted to do.
Yeah, so one of the first ideas was that from the lodge, you'd be able to sit in a comfortable chair and look at this almost living piece of artwork, which has an wheelchair and stroller accessible pathway that you can stroll around all the way to this high point and afford views of the park and interact with the water in a way where you don't need to get soaking wet, but you really feel like you're in a water garden and you enjoy the sound and cooling effects of the water elements. And there was always this idea of a overhung misty space, for lack of a better term, we called it a grotto for a long while. And as you can see underneath that grotto space is where you have that misty experience that children love, adults love. It's just such a surprise when you come around the corner.
That's not CGI. Although it looks like it.
And then, of course, there's going to be children and adults who want to get soaking wet and splash around. So we have splash pads and then a whole other range of ways to interact with water, whether it be going through a handrail or runnel, something you can just kind of sit by and enjoy koi fish swimming around. So really trying to make it accessible to everyone who, some people like getting sprayed with water, some people don't. So mixing that all together in one piece of program was the intent of this space. Jeff, do you think it gets a wide range of user groups?
Oh, there's no question. Whether you're a young kid or young at heart, when you walk through this area, you, to Scott's point, you can engage or not engage as much as you want. But the elegance of the stacked rock is quite incredible. It just looks like it was, basically the earth was carved away and this was kind of there and hidden. And so it looks very natural and very just part of the landscape, like it's been there forever.
And just like any park opening, there's a fear that no one's going to show up. And I believe, Jeff, you all had projections on how many you might expect, and I think it was far exceeded. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the number of visitors you had that first year and ongoing.
Yeah, we felt, we kind of in our early estimates thought somewhere between 1 and 1.3 million visitors to the park. We were actually welcomed the first year 3.3 million people to the park. We suffered a little bit in 2019. In the spring of 2019, we had a very large flooding event on the Arkansas River. In fact, it did about $5 million in damage to some of the riprap and flood control mitigation and landscape that was there on the riverfront. And then, of course, 2020 and 2021, we've been besieged with the pandemic, which early on was really, really hard on attendance. But as people began to feel like outdoors was a place that they could safely be, our numbers rebounded towards the end of 20 and early 21. So, but it definitely changed the way people interact with the park. We'll be back this year at about 2.5 million visitors. And so I feel like in 23, we'll be back to nearly 3 million a year.
And you definitely get your vitamin D in Tulsa.
Yes, this year a lot more so.
So onto the adventure play garden, I think some of our favorite elements in the park. And really the intent of this is caregiver and child engagement, and how when a parent or grandparent or any sort of caregiver comes to the park with a child, how do you really create an environment where they're interacting with one another, creating positive memories with one another, and just really learning about one another? And George's quote, "No child is responsible for the circumstances of their birth," just gives me goosebumps. It's such a incredible quote. And Jeff, I know you mentioned a little bit about early childhood development, but I know there's a lot more GKFF is doing in that regard. Is there anything else you can say about
Sure.
the importance of children?
Yes, we have 4 educare sites, early educare sites. We're the largest early ed program deliverer in the United States. And then we have about 3 dozen what we call Educare Light, which are educare programs through Community Action Project, which is a local nonprofit. So there's pretty much every child between birth and 8 have some sort of touch point with an early childhood program of the George Kaiser Family Foundation. So a very strong and deliberate effort to work with parents, teaching parents how to be good parents, and helping kids learn, and the confluence of health and helping improve birth outcomes. I mean, just all sorts of things around children and parents.
That's great. And one portion of the site was where horses used to run around and was somewhat unmaintained forest. So you can see in the image to the right, there were a lot of downed trees, a lot of saplings coming up, but we instantly realized the value in having a thick canopy of shade for children in a place that you'd probably spend the day at. And we radically transformed our plans to maintain this existing asset. And what we did was we wove general park circulation through this area in the forest. And then in between that park circulation, we started to develop ideas about play spaces that appeal to different age groups or play types and play value. So some are for the youngest of kids, ages 0 to 2. Some are more for teens. Some are more about water play. Some are more passive. Some are more active. So it's about a 4 to 5 acre playground, which is a large playground and just full of surprising elements. A lot of the playground equipment, I'd say a majority of it, started with hand drawings and developing it thematically and through model making. And this is really where we worked out the playground design, was in this model. And most importantly, the universal accessibility that Matt, I think you should say a few things about.
Well, it's just an extremely complicated design process to do this right, especially once you try to weave it into the living landscape of the trees and all of the greenery that we incorporated. Many people probably, I've seen plenty of playgrounds that are just, kind of fenced off separate area and, with no natural interaction. And it's much harder to try to weave it around into the natural experience. And then all of the custom made stuff that we did. And there's a lot of kind of aerial elements and, circulation connections that really, to understand it, you need to make a model of it. This is, I think, might even be 1/2 inch equals a foot. I can't remember, Scott, but it's quite a big model. And you can really talk to your collaborators that you're working with using this. You could obviously show donors if you need to. You could show the client, but mostly we do this for ourselves. This is the model here is actually in the office in this picture, although it eventually made its way to Tulsa. And it is just how we work. And it's part of that iterative process that I mentioned earlier on.
We could easily spend an entire hour just on this playground. So we're trying to highlight the kind of process and design aspects. But Richter Spieler out of Germany was such a great collaborator. We were able to visit their facility with Jeff and others from the George Kaiser Family Foundation and really create these custom and unique play equipment that was fabricated in Germany and then disassembled and delivered to Tulsa.
Yeah, an important piece of research we did was go to Europe and look at new play opportunities and things that they're doing in Europe. There's not as many lawyers in Europe, so basically they are more experimental with children's play equipment and things like that. And so you could go and learn from, from that. And Jeff had a great time, I think, going all around various places in Europe, looking at some interesting installations.
Again, just part of the design Matt spoke of, we did not want a typical playground. We really, and this is an area that we spent, I would say Scott, Matt, and there was a team of, I don't know, half a dozen other MVVAers, if not more. Plus we had some early childhood folks involved. We had a safety advisor. We also had kind of a natural play expert that was involved. We wanted something that really pushed the envelope. We went through a lot of different ideas on how to structure the playground, and centered up on kind of these age ranges and how to kind of customize play area by age. And I think there's some other slides that kind of help us with this, but the playground was super important to the foundation.
And Jeff, you could go forward, Scott, but you guys also staff this thing wonderfully, I would say. Scott, isn't it almost unique the way the level of staffing that they do in this thing compared to some of our others? They got staff and volunteers both, right?
Yes,
positioned all the way throughout this thing. So it's really, could talk a little bit about that. I love the volunteers. They tend to be the nicest of everybody you run into too.
Yeah, we also have program. We found these boxes, these wooden boxes that we've installed through different areas of the park where we have places where we can do kind of what we would call pop-up programming. I don't know if we have a picture of those, but those get loaded up at night. And then the volunteers and the staff then can open them up and they can have a reading time, or they can do artwork, or a lot of times we have the zoo come, or we have like little farms that'll bring, say, chickens or pigs, or, and they'll set up in the little kind of this little open area. We have magicians or scientists that come and do experiments. The Children's Museum will come and do pop-up programming, but MVVA created places to play, but they also created places for us to activate within the playground. We have an area that is for the wee littles, kind of the tummy time, early crawler type area called Volcanoville, which is right behind this area. And it has a lot of benches around the perimeter, trying to keep parents and caregivers from helicoptering over their children and allowing them to roll or have tummy time in kind of an open free play area. And there's things on the ground that they can do and such. But again, we have early childhood experts that will go in very casually. It's not overt, oppressive type programming, but just creating conversation and creating ideas for parents and caregivers. So, and then we have things that are pop up that are for older kids too. So there's all sorts of like making buttons or making things. So, there's all sorts of things that can be done in the playground area.
Yeah, and when developing a playground, there's usually a lot of checklists and safety lists, and it's, do you have enough swings and enough upper body strength? But a lot of what we look into are these stages of development. Jean Piaget is famous for that, and others. But for example, object permanence develops between 0 to 2. So if you're between ages 0 and 2 and you're caregiver disappears, you haven't figured out that they'll come back yet. So to Jeff's point, in Volcanoville and here, open sight lines, even at, you know, a little fella crawling around and maintaining those sight lines creates a psychologically comfortable space for children. So really thinking through that. And then these ideas of open-ended play, where these upside down trees could be elephants walking through a forest to kids. They could be coral reef. They could be squids. They get to choose what it is. So we have very thematic spaces where it's obvious what the theme is, and then very open-ended spaces. And these trees were actually repurposed from some of the more dangerous trees within the forest. So a story of reuse as well. Going to Germany and learning from experts, one of which was the disciple of Kugelhaus, who developed these sensory elements, and this idea that there's educational spaces through action and not thought, and a whole lot of caregiver interaction. Children can learn about scientific phenomenon in the spaces and reflectivity and all sorts of interesting non-traditional play type elements. And a lot of space is scaled for kids, where they can have their own conversations. And to Jeff's point, it's kind of hard to helicopter in this space. It's contained, it's tight, the furnishings are scaled for children, and it really allows them to interact without too much supervision. And no instructions, spaces where you just show up and you can decide if it's a performance venue, if it's a place to take a seat. Jeff, you hit on this, but this is one of those spaces that GKFF programs with those pop-up programming, and maybe you could say some of the uses you see here.
Yeah, we have a lot of, I mean, we do a lot of musical events here. I mentioned the magician will come. We have some people that do some, I don't know how to describe it, like a lot of acrobatics that will come and use the space. It always becomes a really big draw when we have activation here. And this is right in the heart of the playground. This is really almost in the center of it, and has become kind of a performance place that people look forward, and it's just great fun. There's places for seating. You can see the repurposed the trees, some of the trees that we had to thin out to make room for the playground, and we've converted those into benches and seats. But it's a great space. It was one that we were a little hesitant in design, but it's probably, I would say, one of our favorite places. And it also has, if you can see these poles, it has LED lights. So at nighttime, when it's less hot, almost all of our spaces have lighting. And so you can have a lot of things in the evening time and nighttime, and it can be safe and fun.
Yeah, that was an important idea we had initially, to try to extend activity into the night in a very comfortable feeling way. I just want to note how many existing big trees are here. If there's any technical designers on the project in the audience, they know how hard it is to work around trees like that and not kill them all. But that was really the hard thing here. And they spent a lot more money doing that with special footings and other types of things to get things to work well and not, have everything die on us in a few years, which is often what happens if you work this closely to existing trees.
Yeah, and a huge component is that it feels fun for everyone. There's certainly a age where children decide they're too cool or too old for playgrounds, but when you have play elements off to the side, contained in a forest, you'll see moments like this where teens are frolicking around, having their own fun time with their friends. And I've even seen adults take a spin, kind of look left, look right, and either shoot down a slide or spin around on this element. So finally, it's something that's really a source of pride for everyone in Tulsa. It seems that everyone loves having the gathering place in their backyard, and it makes them just a lot more happy and able to share their love of Tulsa by having this park. Jeff, can you say something about that?
Yeah, this is all of the towers are interconnected with these roped bridges, and real great. I mean, this is really, I mean, this is all of this area is probably the most active area, and again, we, you know, a lot of times play equipment, you know, it's plasticized wood or metallized metal, and it doesn't have tactical feel. It doesn't have engagement. You know, people don't want to do ropes because it'll wear out. And so all of this area really sparks a lot of creativity and mindfulness and pushes the edge of play. You know, the attorneys have really squeezed out, I think, what the meaningful parts of playgrounds are. And by putting everything, you know, 16 inches off the ground and, you know, just taking the fun out. And kids, once they master the hardest element of the playground, then they don't want to come back. This playground, there's, you can come back 20 or 30 times, you know, a year, and there's always something new and different that engaging with kids. These blue herons that are down here on the bottom, we have this land of the river giants, and you can see the blue herons, and they've kind of become the iconic kind of logo or emblem, if you will, in the community, and have kind of taken on a life of their own. We have them on coffee mugs now and t-shirts for kids. Again, Tulsans are just so enamored with the playground elements, and even people that don't have kids and are just walking through the park, this elevated pathway with this bridge, this was a very expensive pathway through, but it allowed people that don't have kids or that just want to hear kids laughing and having fun and just getting glimpses, allowed them a pathway through that they could enjoy it and kind of experience it without having to be in it. And it's been a real important path within the park.
That's great. So we'll do about 15 more minutes of presentation, then open it up to Q&A. One of the great aspects of GKFF is that given that Tulsa is a car culture city, a lot of people don't have the means to even get there in the first place. So GKFF has implemented a free shuttling system throughout Tulsa. Next, on to Peggy's Pond, this idea that we wanted to create a sense of nostalgia for people, this idea that children born in Tulsa can have these experiences and grow up and want to take their children, the kind of intergenerational aspects of a big public park. And we always had this idea that there would be a tunnel of trees that you could canoe through, and that would support that sense of nostalgia. It's really the central feature within the park, and a majority of the spaces have an edge shared with the pond. So large gathering lawns, play areas, mist mountain, a watery circulation system. And it also acts as the green engine for the park. We're not going to get too much into the sustainability and green infrastructure of the park, but it is a major component. And this pond accepts all the stormwater, cycles it through, cleans it, and if there is an overflow, distributes it into the Arkansas River. There's so many ways to interact with the edge, whether it be rocking comfortably on a dock and enjoying the views, pulling up your kayak to a sandy beach where there's fires at night, or as, you know, proof of concept, canoeing as children through the tunnel of trees. It's just really that sense of nostalgia and that poetic, passive space in the park. Beyond, you will see the boathouse, which we'll get to next. Jeff, maybe you could say a little bit about the programming. I think we have a few slides here, but what is the number of events that are hosted in the park generally?
Yeah, so on major signature events, we have 8. But we have something going on and programmed in the park every single day. When we started, we were very deliberate in creating large scale events that would entice people from all over the city to come. It was so important that we made sure that there was something for everyone. And the event wasn't just the dance or the music, but it was also the food and kind of all of the accessories, if you will, to bringing people together. And so, whether it was Tulsa in Harmony, which is a giant gospel program, this is one of our absolutely most favorite programs. We had Fiesta de Tulsa, which was one of the most popular ones. It's kind of a multicultural Latin program, Hispanic program, brings again people from all over the community into the park. And then we do things like yoga in the park, or different kids programming. We've had a lot of national groups come. Dr. Seuss has come to the park, and just trying to make it fun and exciting for kids and adults of all ages. But what it does is it brings people to the park, and then they see the beauty of the park, and then they see the playground, and then it becomes kind of part of their routine. So the programming is just really kind of a lever for getting people to make the decision to come and experience it. We'll have anywhere from 6 to 15,000 people at any one of our big events. So it really is an event that brings people to the park.
That's great. So the boathouse is the other major piece of architecture in the park, and we define it as a nexus of gathering, discovering, and learning. And at the lowest level, it provides access to Peggy's Pond. And at the highest level, it's an overlook where you can afford views of the park, bring your lunch, or there's also food options as well. There's a fancy restaurant without the cost there. So you can bring your family, and if you have a birthday or a special event, not spend a lot of money, but have a very high-end experience. It's just an incredible gift that the George Kaiser Family Foundation can give to the city. And then there's also completely unexpected program. This was an artist by the name of Ken Dion who developed the Cabinet of Wonders. It was originally a kind of an idea that Max Scoggin and Merrill Elam had, who were the architects on the project, but just a space where you could, I don't know, get away from everything and just have a stimulating space to enjoy elements. Jeff, Matt, is there anything you want to say about this space?
Well, this was originally we were having this very freewheeling conversation about lodges, and we're now in the boathouse, but in the lodge I was talking about a lodge in a Boy Scout camp and how it would have stuff that you'd do like a stuffed beaver in there or something like that, and you go and see that, and it would be so interesting and engaging in a funny way. And that evolved into this idea of, oh, let's make a cabinet of wonders. And we had this idea, well, let's make a cabinet of wonders, but who has time to design a cabinet of wonders? and then Jeff found, I don't know how you found Ken Dion, Jeff, but we found a guy who basically makes cabinets of wonders. I mean, he just gathers all of these incredible objects and then displays them in this engaging way, these drawers you could pull out and see collections. And it's just, you could spend 2 hours in there looking at this thing. It's just, this is one tiny piece of it.
Yeah, this is one of the most important kind of things that we did was, and everyone thinks this is kind of for older people, but what makes it fun, and I'll just give some experience, my personal experience with my kids who are now 13, 14. When we first started this project and they were putting all this in, he has these telephones that have cords and dials. And my boys, they went and reached up and were like, what is this? And it's a telephone, but then I got to explain to them about that telephone, because all they've known are basically iPhones. I mean, they haven't really experienced. So all of the things here, these wooden mallets, or there's political buttons in one of the drawers, but there's always something for, whether it's a grandparent or a child, there's always something for someone to talk about and share and exchange. And that's what this exhibit does. Mark travels all over the world doing exhibits. He's never done one in a park. This was the very first time. The ones that he had done before were always in universities. They always have these large, like, rock collections, or, they might have old medicine containers. And so they don't know what to do with them. And he would organize them, in very meaningful ways. So that's kind of how he started his art. And it really is art. He traveled all over the world to collect these things. He went to tons of flea markets in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. But then he also went to flea markets in Turkey, where he has a pterodactyl model that's hanging on the ceiling. It's just amazing what he collects, and his eye for being able to put them all together.
On to the Sky Garden. This space was really about celebrating Tulsa's ecotype and the vegetation of some of those reference sites we saw. So we went to the reference sites, we experienced them, and then developed a rendering trying to highlight a stony walkway, a public garden. There could be little signs that describe the plants, and you could go back to your house and plant them at your house, and really just a celebration of texture and color. This is on top of one of the land bridges. So if you had X-ray vision, you'd be looking at a highway. And the idea is that there's a very ordered, simple form in the middle that you circulate around, and then a garden-like path. This was during construction, and it's grown in really nicely. And it's just a nice stroll, one of those passive spaces to complement the exuberant activity everywhere else. Matt, do you want to say anything about the planting design?
It's just, every kind of park has to have some characteristic in terms of horticulture. What's the angle? And here, we're living in really a garden city. A lot of people have houses with yards, and the idea that the park could be, in a way, a great place to learn about more about horticulture. And you could walk through and see plants you like, and bring them, bring the idea home to your space. It was another way of connecting to people, through horticultural connections and landscape, and even residential landscape. So there's a kind of a garden-like quality to this park that's more explicitly garden-like, I would say, than many of our other parks, because of that reason.
And then just that strong connection between the indigenous communities of Tulsa and a lot of that vegetation.
Yeah.
I think we have 2 more spaces left, so bear with us. This isn't even all the spaces. Just for the record, we've picked our favorites. We could spend 5 hours talking about Gathering Place. The Four Seasons Garden was really inspired by that Chandler Park image that we showed you earlier. These tight, compressive spaces that you move through, the texture of the stone. So we went there, and then we developed this idea in the longer, skinnier piece of the site that's sandwiched between residential backyards and an arterial road. Why don't we construct a canyon of stone and recreate that Chandler Park experience? So we did that through developing models. You can see on this side, you would have residential backyards, on this side a road. So it really creates a sense of containment and passage. It's graded at a very gradual slope, so it's very comfortable to move through, even if you're elderly. There's a tremendous amount of shade, there's comfortable seating, and it just feels very of Tulsa. A lot of developing the legitimacy of this feeling like a piece of found quarried space is by really studying the way the stones meet together. And you can see here we used wood block, and then the built form of that, you can see one of those seams here as well. And it really is a place where the elderly come to kind of stroll through. It's right next to a parking area and drop off. So you could dip into here for 3 minutes and have a park-like experience Jeff, what would you say the user group is here, and how do people interact with this space?
Well, I mean, everyone loves this area because of its shade, and because it starts off with these kind of what I would characterize as smaller columns of rock. They feel like they're actually going to fall into the pathway. We also have some benches, some stone kind of outcroppings that people can sit on at the very top. So people of all ages love and enjoy this area. To Scott's point, a lot of older Tulsans love this walk up to the Sky Garden. This connects directly with the Sky Garden, so they can. A lot of our nursing home facilities will drop off people on the roadway that's at the base of this, and people that maybe have some mobility issues, they can have a short walk up and see the garden and then walk back down. So while they may not have the entire park experience, they're able to kind of dive in and dive out for those momentary kind of experiences. And but people from all ages use this pathway. It's a great walk.
Skate and BMX, cool places for teens. As I said earlier, teenagers are very hard to program for in parks. They're kind of the lost age group. You got playgrounds and you got places for adults, and then in between we have teens. And early on, we were cognizant of the fact that your average skate park in a city is in the outskirts. It's in some derelict field with nothing around it. So we made a deliberate choice to put the skate valley and pump track right on one of the main entrances of the park, place a gathering lawn in between, and a whole lot of programming around it to make it really the front door, and flip the idea that skating's bad and only troublemakers skateboard. And to get the local teen community excited, we had our own design charrette and solicitation process at advertising at skate shops and other skate parks throughout Tulsa. And it was just so adorable seeing these teens come in and cut up templates of skate features they'd like to use. And we had them get together in groups and present. This gentleman here's a professional skateboarder. So it was super exciting for the teens. And they were really able to see their efforts in the built work, because we were able to work with California skate parks and develop the plan based on that feedback. As you can see here, just that programmatic mix that makes the skate park feel more integrated and central into the park. So we have boat ramps. You can see where that drop off that Jeff was talking about here, the Four Seasons Garden as you come up, and the Sky Garden. As you come around, there's just an entirely different user group. So really forcing these different user groups to be together and gather, you see throughout the park design. And then beyond, more traditional sports courts here. Another thing we're always told is you can't have nice trees in a skate park. They said don't even plant them, they're just going to get destroyed. Again, if you maintain something well and you put up that initial cost, proof of concept that people will treat it well. It's that whole psychology of a space, and making sure it's well loved by the community. And then here's the BMX pump track. You'll see kids on razor scooters, skateboards, BMX bikes. This is the beginner area with much smaller features. And then if you go over this bridge, there's a much more extreme side to it as well. And the George Kaiser Family Foundation is very supportive of fitness in the park. The idea that health and wellness is central to livable cities. So there's a whole lot of programming around fitness in the park as well. So finally, the results. Did it work? According to USA Today, Time Magazine, and National Geographic, yes, because it's been received a countless number of awards, which we're all very proud of. And really the proof of concept was on day one, where everyone that lived in Tulsa, just like many American cities, have bubbles. We get in our cars, we go to the grocery stores we want to go to, the schools we want to go to, and we don't have to interact with others unless we want to. And it was really bizarre that first day where everyone in Tulsa was all of a sudden together and amongst each other and mixing together, for some for the very first time, I think. And you can see it in this image and all the smiles on people's faces, the diversity, the excitement, really proof of concept. So Jeff, maybe you could say a little bit about that opening day and what you expected and what the outcome was.
Yeah, we really talked and discussed how to open the park. And it was something that we wanted there to be a lot of ramp up to. So the playground actually got done in January of 2018, and we made it site secure, and we had about 30,000 kids that came out the entire month of January. And it was every kid from kindergarten up to about 4th grade. And we scheduled all the school groups in 2-hour increments. What we were trying to create was those kids going home, the kids, number one, being the first ones in the park. That was a full 9 months before we opened it. And we wanted them to create table conversations with their parents, their grandparents, their caregivers, about how cool this park was. And it set the city on fire. At the same time, the kids of Tulsa were challenged to read 2 million books in order to open the park. And we had an integrated program with all of the school districts where our reading tree, which is one of the largest, oldest trees on the site, came to life and through animation and encouraged the kids of Tulsa to read these books. And if they read a certain number of books in their classroom individually and then as a class, they would get a gold medal for reading and opening the park. And then on the day that we opened the park, if you brought your medal, then you were able to be the very first one through the doors of the park and into the park. And so we really, everything about the opening was all about the kids. And that was the focus. And even the groundbreaking, we had little golden shovels and a big sandbox, and the kids actually broke the ground. Of course, you had the donors in the back with the big shovels, but all the pictures that were in the paper were all of the kids with their little shovels. And that's really all the way through this. That's what it's about, was the children and integrating the opening with them. We did have the Roots come. They play for Jimmy Fallon on the Tonight Show, and we had them come and be the opening band. And this is a picture of the crowd. We had about, I don't know, it was close to 20,000 people in the park to open the park the first night. And this is a picture of the crowd getting ready for the band.
And finally, our work is not done. We have a lot more to complete for the park. The Discovery Lab was just opened and the associated landscape there in our phase 2 site. We're actively constructing an additional 5 acres of parkland and a kayak flume in the water. And also we call it the Gateway Bridge now, right, Jeff?
Williams Crossing.
Williams Crossing. And the Williams Crossing, which connects the other side of the Arkansas River to the park. And beyond, you see Turkey Mountain, which is Tulsa's largest natural urban landscape, which we are working on a master plan and implementing that as well. So a whole lot of other moving parts in Tulsa. This is just the start of our work there. And I think it's time for conversation.
I'm sure I speak for the audience. This has been absolutely thrilling, for all of the overuse of the term delight in design. I don't know that I've ever seen a full realization of delight in design like you've just shared with us today. We are going to go to our Q&A and see what kinds of questions we have from the group. Let me see. And Jess Mendez, our Director of Communications, is going to share this responsibility with me. There's a guest who's actually asking, thank you for this very moving presentation. I see that there are a lot of civic programs integrated into the park. My question is, why the park versus a more urban setting?
The park is actually located in the center of town. It's 5 minutes from downtown Tulsa. We actually have an actual urban park that is in our arts district called Guthrie Green. That's actually has a performance stage and restaurant as part of it. But this park is surrounded by neighborhoods on both sides of the river and is connected by a couple of hundred different miles of trails that all run up along the Arkansas River. So it really is an urban park in the center of town and right on the banks of the Arkansas River.
Thank you, Jeff. Jess, you want to take the next one from Todd Hansen, please?
Of course. Does the park have set hours? How is Tulsa balancing the importance of keeping this welcoming and safe space for all with the inherent needs and attraction of the homeless community?
Yes, we do have hours on the park. And we make the park accessible to the neighborhood in the early mornings and late evenings for people that are walking or running or biking. We also have the main trails, which remain open 24/7. Balancing keeping it welcoming and safe. One of the things that MVVA was really an encourager through the design process is, eyes in the park keep bad things from happening. And the more you create places for everyone to want to be, the more eyes you will have in the park. And the more eyes you have in the park, the more of the kind of things you don't want in the park, those people won't be in the park. And it was a little hollow and a little hard for us to wrap our heads around, but there is a lot of truth in that. And because the park is such an active park and there's so many people in and out of it in all different times, it doesn't really have a place where homeless can encamp and be kind of out of sight. They're kind of right there, and they're not comfortable with that. They want to be in places where they can kind of be hidden. So we really have not had a homeless problem within the park at all.
We've just had a question, actually a guest joining us from Singapore, asking if this would be available subsequent to the live talk. And yes, it indeed will. There'll be a captioned version that will be available. So the entire program will be available on the IHCD website as soon as we can get it up. So thank you, Shreya, for asking that question. If we could turn to a question Jess, would you, Megan, from our own team, ask a question here?
Of course. Could you talk about any specific public feedback that had a big impact on the design? What are some things that you have learned from the public engagement on this project?
And 3 cheers on the degree of public engagement. This is a level of commitment and a shared effort with the funder that I don't think, and most of us have ever witnessed. So I think there's a lot to learn from the public engagement model here.
Yeah, it's pretty unparalleled, I'll be very honest. And we took a lot of, the foundation is not used to taking criticism, but it's hard to build this massive of a project in the middle of a community. And so it was challenging at times. I would say that, we had a lot of confirmation on some ideas we had for the park, but there were a lot of things like the water play, like all of the boats. That was a public comment that was brought in that wasn't necessary. I mean, it was an idea we had, but we didn't really know. That was something that was super informative. We created a yoga area and meditation area that we really didn't have planned. That was an idea that came. Tulsans had long wanted access to the Arkansas River on lower trails. And we're, to Matt talking, or maybe it was Scott talking about the 5 acres that we're adding. You know, we have a lower trail. And so there's a lot of interaction with the Arkansas River that's going to be realized in this next phase. So there's a lot of those types of things that were kind of woven into the design. I mean, the public engagement is incredibly important, and everyone feels like they have an idea in the park. The masterfulness is how MVVA, they're expert park builders. They know what communities want and need. But what I really appreciated was that they engaged the community and went through all those ideas and sifted through them with the community, not really for the community. And that was unique and different. And a lot of architects pay lip service to the community engagement process. And that wasn't the case in MVVA's point. It was a very, very important part and communication with the community. And that's why we did so much of it. And that's a testament really to Michael and his entire team, because that's kind of a philosophical hallmark for their firm. And I think that's important to note.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of the public feedback was more experiential than specific elements, like things they wanted to go and do and be together. But there were some concrete adjustments. There was a lot of concern about the adjacent neighborhood and what was going in their backyard. So we revised the plan to install a large berm around the entire perimeter, which provided acoustical and visual buffer from people's backyards. A lot of people were enamored by that existing grove of trees, and they didn't want to see that wiped out. So we had to modify our plan to keep those trees. So it was more about what was there and how it was changing their daily life that we were really sensitive to.
And you seem to have been successful in engaging adolescents, which is always a coup. A much needed
Certainly.
aspect of the park. We have a question from our colleagues in Japan, because in our experience working with our colleagues in Japan, they are the most devoted people in the world to public toilets and to quality public toilets. So we want to know, tell us about the toilets. We haven't seen any pictures of toilets, but you've told us and referenced that they are there. So talk to us about toilets. And have you done any toilets that were specifically designed for children? What have you done on toilets?
I'll say one thing in the playground. I don't know, Scott, it might even be in that aerial photo, but we were thinking about accessibility, and one of the things that you see with helicopter parents is they don't want the kids to get dirty, because then they're going to get the car dirty or whatever, like crazy control freak stuff like that. And so we had this idea of cabanas. So we have bathrooms in several locations throughout the park, and they're in the lodge or in the boathouse. And then there's these cabanas, and there's some more down by the sports courts and skateboarding. But there's a set of cabanas in the playground itself that you walk directly into each one. So it's big enough that a family could have a couple of kids in there that they got to get in and out of bathing suits or change their wet clothes or do diaper changes or anything like that. That very accommodating within that. I think I got that idea from the Jersey Shore when I grew up, and how great cabanas were there. But that was where that's one of the special things that we have there.
That's a terrific answer. We urge you to add some pictures of the cabanas.
We actually have local artists that painted murals in each of the bathrooms at the playground. So there's artwork. Each one of them is unique and different. We also have a playground that is for children who are on the spectrum, that's quiet and has a very low light. So all of those family bathrooms allow families to go in. There's changing tables. We have large changing tables in case an adult needs a changing table or a bench. The toilets are the ones in in the playground are all porcelain toilets. And then we also have family bathrooms and nursing facilities in the lodge for nursing mothers. So we have a lot of different spaces to take care of kind of the personal needs of the various people within the park.
Wonderful. And we have a number of people who've been responding who have been to the park. In one case, based in New Hampshire, but born in Tulsa and has been there many times. Very
Right.
pleased to have the presentation. And I don't know if we have additional questions.
We have one more. How are you keeping the prices low on concessions in the upscale restaurant? Does the Kaiser Fund subsidize those services?
There is some subsidizing. Keeping the prices low has been challenging in this inflationary marketplace. We're doing, it is a challenge. We've kind of bifurcated our menu selection to allow for kind of more price point targeted, but then also offer kind of things that, more people can, giving variety of pricing and variety of items is really the way we've tried to attack it. But with inflation this year and the price of food going up, it has been incredibly challenging. I'll be very honest. But for instance, we have the cheapest ice cream scoop in Tulsa. We're offering now soft serve ice cream too as another option, again, to give people price choice. So,
Jeff, how many staff do you have in the summer and in high season?
Yeah, so in the normal day in and day out, we have approximately 130 staff. We'll ramp up to about 180 in the summertime. What we're beginning to learn, having been now just open 4 short years, and having the pandemic in the middle of that and the flood that I spoke about, we're trying to understand the usage numbers. And believe it or not, our largest usage is between spring break and Memorial Day, and between Labor Day and Christmas. Those are kind of, so what is typically in like a paid park experience, the summer being the most busy, what we're finding in a free park environment is people will come because they can come anytime, it doesn't cost them. They'll come in when things are cooler and nicer and easier for accessibility. And so it's on that spring and that fall time frame. So we're trying to adjust our staffing accordingly and our programming accordingly. And that's just something we're kind of learning as we go.
From our perspective as designers, the fact that he has that many staff here is really the difference. You walk through the place, there's not a piece of garbage anywhere. There's not a weed anywhere. There's people that, ask you if you need help finding something. It's just really the big difference in terms of, the design is one thing, but really all the human power that goes into this is just makes it the great experience that it is.
And we have a cadre of 600 volunteers that come and do anything from, horticulture maintenance. We have master gardeners that come and work in the garden areas. We have people that volunteer to clean the boats. We have all sorts of people that volunteer to do all sorts of things. So a lot of Tulsans want to engage in it and help maintain it and take care of it.
So since go ahead, please.
Just 600 volunteers is
Staggering.
that in only 4 years of opening. That's really good. I mean, and it does say something about the people of Tulsa. They're very, very friendly people. I would say at public meetings, people would always come up and think, oh, here's a guy from New York, and you make some question like, oh, what do you think about coming to Tulsa? Like as if I'd have some attitude about it. And I said, well, I love to come to Tulsa. I learned how to be nice again.
So Jeff, I guess if I might ask the last question, this was a vision. This international competition was a vision, and it was about bringing a city together with a painful history. Has that worked? It sure sounds like it has, but tell us,
You
Kaye,
know,
what, does that worked?
I think our world problems and our national problems are really overwhelming at times. I wouldn't say that this is at all by any means solved or corrected, or I think it has made a step towards bringing a community together. And I think that, it's more than aspirational. It certainly isn't a solution. But our community has, on its 100th commemoration of the horrific race massacre, we've built a history center. We're telling the story. We're listening to the story ourselves, and we're starting that healing process ourselves. And the park is just one component of that. Oklahoma itself has a lot of history. The Native American story and the Trail of Tears. I mean, there are many, many, many threads to these types of things and these atrocities that we're having to come to grips with. And all we can say is the park is helping bringing people together to have those interactions and heal as a community.
Thank you. Beautifully done. Thank all of you. This is an extraordinary opportunity, a true gift to everyone who is here today and to everyone who will listen to it subsequently. So cheers to all of you, and thank you for this extraordinary work. And you've completely changed my thinking about the size of models and what matters. Many thanks. Thanks everyone for coming and joining us for this extraordinary experience. I wish I had a bus on my way to Tulsa and pick you all up. One day. Thank you.
Everyone's
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.